Hey, Joe.
What's up, John?
How are you?
I'm doing really well. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. This is an exciting day. As with always, there's always tech difficulties. It doesn't matter what you
Yes,
do. So
yes.
if you had trouble finding the stream, we apologize, but hopefully it's all linked back correctly now.
Yeah. So I have had a lot of tech issues and trying to figure out camera and everything. It's part of the process, though.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. But that's leadership, right?
Exactly. It's
Like
absolutely part of leadership because
overcoming challenges.
when you have a problem, you got to figure out how to solve it. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'm excited today to be with Joe. How long have we known each other now? Almost a year.
Almost a year.
Almost
Yeah.
a year. It
Yeah.
feels like.
Probably. Yeah. Probably about six, 9
9 months,
months. Yeah.
yeah. Had coffee with him. We're both early birds, so we met first time at what,
Not as
5
early as
a.m.
you, though.
That's true. I'm
You're
up at
pretty crazy.
3:30 every morning. Um, Only partially by choice. 4:30 would be my choice. 3:30 is an accommodation for my spouse.
Yeah.
So
Yes. Well, I am not that early, but
Well,
early
I mean, you were
enough
up,
to be able to get coffee.
yeah, 5 o'clock. I think both times.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, so I think if you're watching my channel, you probably know a little bit about me, but you may not know a ton about Joe. So, Joe, would you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Joe Makston. I'm the founder of Ripple Effect Consulting. So I've spent 20 years in banking, plus another 7 years in the fintech space. And a lot of my work has been around leading teams, being a leader of leaders, ultimately designing leadership development programs, and focusing on employee experience. So actually, last year I got laid off, and I decided that I wanted to make sure that I'd spend more time with leaders, helping them understand the dynamics and the
Mm,
complexity of leadership development,
yeah.
to really make an impact not only on leaders, but then that trickle down effect of helping employees. So kind of here we are with Ripple Effect, making an impact.
Yeah, and SML Consultative being so similarly aligned, it was very much a
Yeah.
match where I discovered that there are so many leaders that are being placed into these positions and given almost no tools.
Yes.
And the resources that are being developed and are most often employed are at the very top levels of leadership, with the thought that it's just going to kind of magically trickle down.
Yeah.
And in your experience, that's not really what happens very often, is
That
it?
it is not what happens, and that's why I think we connected so easily of just
Yeah.
realizing that leaders need ongoing education,
Mm.
but education is not the sole solution. And that's why we started talking about, like, well, why hasn't leadership problems, why hasn't like that been solved?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got 60 years of, or more than 60, really. But I think the term servant leadership was coined back in like the 30s or 40s,
Mm.
and then you started to see groups like Carnegie and Covey and Maxwell and some of these names. Now we've got Sinek and others that are. But the overwhelming question that I get, and there's actually an individual that I semi connected with on LinkedIn that loves to claim like all these solutions, none of them actually work, and of course he believes his solution works, but
Right. Well, don't we all, though? It's like,
yeah,
here's my three things to do, and
yeah,
but there's a reality around, you can have like the best formula, you can have the best training, but if it's not applied and if there's not a mindset
mm,
shift, then it's not going to impact the organization. It's not going to help meet the goals that you have of
yeah.
generating revenue, impacting lives, whatever your goal might be.
Yeah, and that's kind of the idea. We titled this after 60 plus years of leadership training. Why isn't it fixed?
Yeah.
Why isn't it fixed? And so I think one of the things that we look at is just kind of diving right into this discussion. We have some questions that we kind of put out to everybody and said, hey, this is what we're going to be covering. This is
Yeah.
what we're going to be doing. Um, what's the purpose of it? Why are we even trying to develop leaders?
Yeah. So there's a book out right now called Boys in the Boat, and this is about the 1936 men's Olympic rowing team,
Okay.
and uh, they do this extraordinary job of telling the story about these men who were like farmers and they worked in shipyards.
Mm,
They weren't your typical rowers.
okay.
So they come together. I think it's Washington State is where they come together
Okay.
to row, and uh, when I think about the purpose of leadership
Mm,
development programs,
yeah.
this is a great example because they didn't know how to row.
Mm,
They had to come together as a team. They needed to have a coach. They
yes.
had to work together. They had to work through their problems.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they beat the Germans, which it's in Germany. They beat the Germans. They beat the Italians, which, but it's only in the last couple of feet. But the work actually happens,
Yeah.
meters. Uh, the work actually happens even before they get into the boats.
Mm, yeah.
And so the purpose of a leadership program is to ultimately be successful as an organization.
Yeah.
But that's creating career paths for
Mm,
employees. That's making sure that it's creating a mechanism to be able to meet the goals within the
yeah.
organization. But the the exciting thing about this story is exponential growth.
Yes.
So if you're in a boat and you're one person and you're rowing, the momentum or the inertia that is required gets you moving, but you're
Mm,
only going to be able to move as much as you can row and then the inertia of that. But you put multiple leaders
mm,
together, that
yes.
becomes exponential.
It
So
does.
you continue to go further because you have people rowing in the same direction, all in alignment.
Yeah.
So that, for me, is purpose of a leadership development program.
Yeah.
Is you get everybody rowing in the same direction,
Really.
understanding how to work through the problems, and you have a coach. So you have a consultant, you have somebody head of learning development, whatever that is, to help further along the purpose of the organization.
Absolutely. I had written a definition when we kind of talked about this originally.
Yeah.
What's the definition of leadership development? And the definition, I have it on my piece of paper here, but I want to say it exactly right. The act of investing in the success of an organization through culture impacting, life-changing
Yeah.
empowerment of those who influence others
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it kind of creates this idea that says, hey, wait, if you have influence, and that doesn't just mean that you have an executive title.
Hmm.
It doesn't just mean that you even have a title. It's investing in those, hey, we see capacity for influence,
Hmm.
and we want to give you the tools to make sure that it is a positive influence,
Yeah.
and it's going to reflect well.
I love that you say invest because it
Mm,
really is an investment.
it is.
You a lot of times you don't see immediate return. It might be that you are getting access to base level training,
Yeah.
but training doesn't solve all of the problems, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about that here in a couple of minutes. But when you start to invest, it's saying this is important.
It is, and it's a lot like marketing in the sense that the ROI is a long term,
Right.
right? The first time you run an ad, sure, you might get like a humongous just flocking to your business, but
That's
usually,
pretty rare.
yeah, usually you run an ad and you're like,
Where is everybody?
where did everybody,
Yeah.
and so then you run another, and you eventually gain brand awareness, and eventually you start to see the reward on that investment. But anybody that's run a marketing agency knows that those first couple of months are just
Yeah.
and with leadership development, we're not just talking about a marketing campaign, we're talking about investing into human beings.
Hmm.
And so that time lapse
Yep.
can be a little bit longer than many times we want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it takes so long, and sorry, I'm keep going through this boat analogy, but it takes a long time to turn a ship. Like, you
It
can't
does.
turn it
No.
overnight. It's going to take work
And
to invest in the organization and those people and change culture. Like, this is about
absolutely.
this is substantively, it's about culture
It
and
is.
how do we redesign culture within an organization to make sure that people see the value of leadership development or training or career growth. We need to reinforce the value of that.
And you mentioned rowing in the same direction, which I think is super valuable. I have not read the book you're talking about, but I think of a time, a couple times where I have just been in like a kayak, a two-person kayak. And if you're not, it's not only that you have to be rowing in the same direction, you have to be rowing in the same synchronicity,
Uh-huh.
right? Otherwise, you start clashing paddles.
Yep.
And so you end up doing more damage than good
Yeah.
because there's not a simpaticoness,
Yeah.
an ability to work kind of forward, and that takes time
Yeah.
for people to align.
Well, this is a really good team building exercise. So if you're trying to figure out like what to do for your 2024 retreat, take your leadership team on
Oh
either
man,
a rowing expedition, or do dual kayaking,
Yeah.
and
Or
it's
tandem bicycles.
yeah, exactly. Where you have
Yeah.
get everybody to go in the same direction. It's a mindset
Hmm.
element, and also just like the coordination of
Yes.
exactly rowing or
Yeah.
rowing together. Well, let's talk about some of the common misconceptions around leadership development. What have you seen in your experience?
I think that for me, the biggest thing that I've seen over the years is this idea of I'll call it event driven development, where
Yeah.
either it is an event, right? A quarterly event, and we are doing leadership development, and it's a 3 day or a 3 hour or whatever it is. Or maybe, oh no, we don't do an event. We know that that's one time. That's nice to get things going. I'm sure we both do events. That's
Yeah.
great.
Hmm.
But so maybe you say, no, it's a little more. And so then people want to sell you a program,
Hmm.
right? And so I see it also program based, that if you'll just take my program, your leadership is going to be solved. It's going to be good to go from that point forward. Um, or I think there's other people that honestly just, if you really get their like deep seated opinion, they think it's all just a waste of time.
Yeah.
You know, they've maybe gone to an event, they've taken a program, they've read the book, whatever it is, and they're just like, my manager didn't change,
Yeah.
or I didn't feel like I was specifically impacted, or whatever their thought process is. So I see a lot of it where we look at it more as this occasion
Hmm.
that, again, we want instant ROI from,
Right. Yep.
instead of recognizing that leadership development is really an investment, and it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah. Well, I actually couldn't say it any better. It's like one and done. It's a mindset
Hmm.
issue where, like, is this really going to work? There have been thankfully just a handful of leaders as I was leading the overseeing the leadership development program at my last company, that was like, why, and you may actually have
Mm.
somebody that has said the same thing of like, well, why do I need to do this? I went through it when I started out, I've done all of the manager training.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of time talking about the difference between manager or boss and leader. Like, if you think about boss, I encourage you to do that for just a second. Like, think about boss,
Yeah.
the word boss, what emotions come up?
Hmm.
And for me, it immediately takes me back to being 16 years old,
Mm.
working at Arby's and and serving roast beef sandwiches, and having a boss that just frankly berated me.
Mm.
Instead of her
Mm.
showing me how to do the work,
Man,
she
that's
would
too
just
bad.
say, why can't you do this right? Did your mom didn't teach you how to do this? Like, it was very much like
Yeah.
this moment of where a boss who should be leading, especially a 16-year-old, I had no idea what I was doing. It was my
Sure.
first job. Uh, to translate that to leader, if she was leading, she would have been doing it differently.
Let me speak to that, because this is, I mean, that's exactly what I saw, right? That these frontline leaders were not empowered. And I remember having a conversation with somebody and kind of just sharing my vision that these frontline leaders needed these empowering tools, because
Yeah.
there's a huge transition between, and what I'm going to assume happened, I don't know, but I'm going to assume that she did really well in her position in staff.
Yeah.
She was great at frying fries, or building the roast beef sandwiches, or whatever it was. And so they promoted her, the natural next step. And there's just a huge chasm between being great at whatever job and being even a mediocre leader. And so I had this individual telling me, they said, well, why do they need training? All we want them to do is make copies of themselves.
Yeah.
And that's like that broken mindset of, I don't
Hmm.
need them to actually lead. What was she trying to do? Why can't you get this? Why can't you be me?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the mentality of copies of copies,
Hmm.
not leadership development.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, hey, why don't you join the conversation with us? What do you think about the misconceptions about leadership? What has been your experience with leadership development programs? In the chat, go ahead and put your questions, put your thoughts. We'll be
Yeah.
looking at the chat as we're talking through
Yes.
this. John, I think you bring up a really good point. Uh, Over and over again, we see really good sales
Yeah.
employees get promoted to being a manager,
Hmm.
because this is another issue within organizations. There's no other career path.
Yeah.
If you do well in sales, then you
Be-
must be a fantastic leader.
Yes.
And so we might equip them with the tactical work around being a manager,
Mm,
how to do the HR stuff,
yeah,
make timesheets,
sure.
PTO, like all of those things. But if we don't put them into a space of where they really understand how to effectively lead, how to coach, how to give
Yeah,
feedback, how to do effective one-on-ones, set expectations, and if you haven't had that modeled, then it's the wild wild west.
it is.
So we see ultimately we see all of these employee relation issues.
Hmm.
That's the result. If
It
you
is. Yeah,
don't
absolutely.
invest in your leaders, then you end up having employee relation issues where leaders, people, humans are saying horrible things like, I can't believe you don't know how to do this. Your mom clearly didn't teach you how to do it.
Yeah,
That is becomes an employee relation issue.
it really does.
Absolutely. So I clearly have something in my gut around being
Well, no.
16-year-old, and it was about sweeping. She was like, "You
Wow.
don't know how to sweep." I'm like,
Oh no.
it's literally just
Pushing a broom.
yeah. But I've seen my kids sweep, and I'm like, "You're not sweeping." So
No,
I
yeah.
get it, but you have to teach. It's about teaching them.
It's empowering. So what are some of the best practices when we're trying to provide these tools?
Yeah.
When we're trying to say, hey, it's more than just making a copy of yourself. It's more than knowing how to write a schedule or make sure that the HR form is filled out. It's certainly more than knowing how to have a redirection meeting or whatever we want, remediation conference. It's more than that. What are some of the best practices you've
Well, I think doing it together, first of all,
found?
is really important for an organization to say, okay, whether you've been a leader in a leadership role for 5 weeks, 5 years, 15 years,
Yeah.
we're going to create a baseline.
Mm,
And time and time again, that ends up being the best practice.
yeah.
I started out as a part-time teller at Bank of America when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And from there, they put me through some leadership training. I continued to grow in my career. I was able to go through more leadership training. And the reality ended up being I would be in these sessions with people who had 20 years experience and I had
Mhm.
5 years experience.
Mm,
So one of the best practices is to be able to say, we're all going to do this at the same time. It gives us common language.
mm,
It gives us good frameworks
yeah.
that can become a repeatable process.
Yes.
And the number two is understanding your unique leadership style. So
Yes.
I don't have to be the same type of leader that you are. Now,
No.
I have to abide by all of the HR
Sure.
rules, but I need to understand the uniqueness of my team.
Mm,
So
mhm,
I shouldn't be approaching with, I'm going to make a copy.
mhm.
I should be
Yeah.
looking at John and say, what are John's gifts? What are John's skills? And then how do I best equip him to be the leader that he needs to be?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're answering those questions. It is it's the assembly line of like,
It
let's
is.
just churn out copy after copy.
Yeah, and I think recognizing personal leadership, other person's leadership, and then differentiating between style and principle.
Yeah.
Right, that's a big deal. I had put some notes down on kind of best practices, and one of the things that I think a lot of companies right now are really resistant to is what I'm going to say is really important. And of course, we say this. Anyone that's watching is going, well, of course you're going to say that. You're both consultants,
Yeah.
and so you're going to put your first thing. But bear with me. Bear with me. I really do believe that bringing in an outside source is really important for effective leadership development. And the reason for that is not because I want your business. It doesn't have to be SML Consultative. It doesn't have to be Ripple Effect. It can be anybody. It needs to be someone from the outside. And the reason for that is very simple. It's what I call proximity effect.
Mhm.
Proximity effect. It's not a religious program, but if I can quote Jesus, he said, "A prophet doesn't have any honor in his own country."
Mhm.
And so the reality is the closer people are to you, they might respect the heck out of you.
Right.
They might love you to pieces. But if you've ever had a spouse or children, you know they are the last person that listens to you. They will listen to anyone else in the world before they'll listen to you. And it's just a head-banging
Yeah.
experience when you've told somebody something that you love and care about many, many times, and they're just like, yeah, uh-huh, uh-huh. And then a year down the road, they're like, I got this great piece of news. This is amazing. And you're like, I've been telling you that.
Right.
That's what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And so bringing someone in from the outside to honestly say the exact same thing you're saying is actually more likely to get through to those leaders and allow it to really impact
Yeah.
them in their leadership journey.
Yeah, well, and along with that, I think we have to recognize that we all have blind spots. As an
100%.
organization,
Yes.
we have blind spots.
Yes.
As individuals, same thing. So
Yeah.
by having somebody from the outside be able to say, "Oh, hey, this is what I see. Take it for what it's worth." Like if I bring a problem to you and I'm like, "Hey, I've been processing this internally and
Yeah.
I'm stuck."
Yes.
Like if you think about, well, how am I going to solve a problem? You get to the point of being stuck.
Yeah.
Well, what would you, if it was a problem? What would you do? Well, hopefully you have a community of people around you that you can
Yes.
ask questions to.
Yes.
If it's, oh, I have this pain in my back, you're going to go to a doctor,
Yeah.
or something's wrong with my eye. I'm going to go see my eye doctor.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go find an expert
Mm-hmm.
that can help me solve the problem with my eye.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Bringing somebody in that
Yeah.
can give you better perspective and guide you
Yes.
along the way will really help designing leadership programs. And there's big organizations, there's consulting groups, whatever your entry point is. In the Google is fantastic. When I do mentoring and coaching with interns, I get this question of like, well, how do you learn this? So, well, one, practice. Two, like creating community. And if you have a problem, like just Google it.
Really?
It's
No.
amazing what you're going to find out there.
And out there's a big deal. You talked about going to the eye doctor, right? So if you're staying within the organization, your eye doctor becomes myopic.
Mhm.
What would happen if you went to the eye doctor and he did his whole little A B, whatever, 1, 2, whatever it is, right? And then said, all right, yep, you're right, you need glasses. And then takes off his glasses and says, here, these work for me, they should work for you.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, that's what we're doing often. Hey, this worked for me, so here's your solution. And an outside organization is able to say, I don't care what's worked for you. Let's look at this uniquely. And I think to me, that's the second thing. You got to break up a pattern.
Yeah.
If you want real leadership development, the pattern has to be broken, because while patterns can be beneficial for efficiency, they're terrible for development.
Mhm.
They're terrible for growth. And then whatever the promises are, whatever it is that we say, hey, we're going to invest in our leaders. I think that any effective program, you got to follow through.
Yeah.
How many programs have you seen? How many endeavors or initiatives have you seen where it was big and it was hype and we're going to do this and we're investing and we care? And 3 months later, it's just no one ever got around to following through on it.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal for an effective leadership development.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I was really intentional in designing. When we did our foundations program, we wanted to make sure that there was ongoing conversations.
Yes.
So you finish the program, and then every month you get together for collaborative connection.
Yeah.
It even helps with that mindset of like loneliness. Oh, I have this issue with my employee. I don't want to go to HR because I should know how to do this, and it's not even like a true HR issue yet. It's just like, I have this conflict between two employees, and I'm like, how do I deal with this? And I've applied the things that I learned,
Yeah.
and it's still not working. So by creating that monthly meeting for the leaders, it was a space for them to be able to say, hey, I have this issue. Is anybody else running into this issue? And then they start peer-to-peer coaching.
Yes.
And it's so much better.
Yes.
It's enriched because it's life experience. It's right away. It's happening real time.
Yeah.
Where other people are able to share, hey, here's my experience. This is what I've done. Have you tried this?
Yeah.
So this thought of like one and done, we know that to not be true. Like you can't go to the gym one time and be swole or to be super skinny. You can't do those things. We all know that. It's January 2024. Everyone's working on resolutions. You can't.
No, it's the 11th. The resolutions have gone out the window. We're back to on the couch eating potato chips.
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, the gym is a lot less busy now than it was
a week ago.
Than it was a week ago. So
yeah. One thing that I think is really important too, if you're coming at this from the HR perspective, or whoever it is that's in charge of the leadership development, one thing that I think I've seen a lot is, for whatever reason, whether it's HR or the executive team or whoever it is, we actually expect more from our leaders than we expect to give to our leaders. And I think that that's inverse to what it
Oh, what
should
a
be.
great observation. Yeah.
We really have these very high lofty, oh, they should know, they should figure it out, they should be studying on the weekends, and we really put a lot of the onus on the leaders, and especially the lower level leaders. So I think it's really important that for a leadership development program, and I use the word program loosely, I'm not talking a 16-week program, I'm talking
Mhm.
about an overall endeavor to empower your leaders, that you don't expect more from them than you're expecting to give to them.
Mhm.
In fact, really, it should be the other way around, right? If the law of attrition says that if I give you something, you're going to probably only actually retain and be able to use at most about 80% of whatever I give you. And so if I'm giving you whatever and I'm expecting 120%,
Right.
I'm setting you up for failure instead of success, and I'm setting myself up for disappointment.
Yeah, yeah. I just saw Adam Grant talking with Jennifer Garner, which is kind of weird
That is
to see
weird.
the two of them. And she was interviewing him. That she was talking about like what's the best advice, and he said, "Well, I live by principle of 19 words." And apologize, Adam, if you're watching this, because I know you're totally watching this. But he says, "I use these 19 words. I have high expectations, and I believe in you, and I know you can achieve this."
Mm,
Now, I know that's not 19 words, but there's the gist.
yeah.
And the reality is, when we say we have high expectations and then we enable and empower and equip the employee to be able to be successful,
Hmm.
then that's me showing up as a leader. And that's me showing the employee, hey, I care enough about you
Yes.
that I'm going to be alongside you.
Yes.
So, if we, yes, you have to have some sort of leadership development program, but the reality is it's a partnership
It is.
of, okay, now who's going to come alongside and
Yeah.
who's going to help, who's going to support, who's going to coach,
Yeah.
especially those frontline leaders. And um, we when we I was just on a podcast that was talking about what's happening with kind of getting rid of the middle manager
Hmm.
uh, layer, and
Yeah.
it kind of happens on a regular basis. And the answer from senior leadership and sometimes from human resources is they're not performing, or
Mm,
their team's not performing. They couldn't get the job done.
yeah.
Well, there's another question of, did we equip them?
And
Did we
almost
give them the
never
tools?
is the answer yes.
Yeah. Well, no. It usually the answer is yes. They went through the leadership development program. They should have been doing it.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the reality is
Yeah.
the support to be able to help them
Mhm.
um, is not there on a consistent
Yeah.
basis. So being able to come alongside, I think, from a best practice piece, it's 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 got to be formalized to
Yeah.
be able to say we have frontline leaders. They don't know what they don't know. Like right now, I'm in a space
Yeah.
of there's so much that I don't know,
Yeah.
and so I need people, and that's part of why we started connecting, because
Yeah.
you're further along in your journey than I am, and finding somebody who's further along in their
Yeah.
journey. But we can't put the onus on somebody who just started as a manager for the first time, to say, oh, I know how to solve all these problems and I know who to go to.
Yeah.
As an organization, we have to offer those solutions
They do.
as part
Yeah.
of a holistically designed program.
Absolutely. The next thing on my list was feedback, but we actually have some. It looks like we have
Yeah.
have a comment. So Rick says it takes 100% buy-in with top line leadership. If they're not walking the talk, it's little more than a warm and fuzzy culture statement posted in the break room. Too often, team members are uncomfortable or even intimidated at the thought of expressing their ideas, concerns, or feelings with leadership. And I think Rick brings up a great point. But at the same time, I think that we, especially though, like you and I, right? How many companies have we worked with where the executive level was not on board,
Yeah.
but we were still expected to empower the lower level leaders? And I don't know, I'm sure you've used a similar line, like be the leader you want.
Yep.
Because Rick's right. If they don't see it in action, it's really tough to walk it out every day.
Yeah.
When when you have a senior leader saying, "I'm not going to change who I am. That's just who I am." Meanwhile, they're telling you you need to grow as a person.
Mhm. Right.
There's a
Yeah.
conflicting message of do as I say and not as I do, which can be really destructive. Rick brings up a great point.
Yeah, and to speak to that just a little bit more, Rick. First of all, thank you
Yeah.
For sharing that perspective, and it's what I've seen in working with companies of where the the organization says we need a leadership development program, we need to equip our leaders. There's data around doing that, but the accountability behind it
Yes.
ends up being the issue, because at the end of the day, a company is trying to generate revenue.
Yes.
And the way they generate revenue is sales, or reducing their expenses. Now,
Absolutely.
laying people off, that can be a way of lowering expenses.
Can.
But there's also an issue with attrition, like the cost of hiring.
Yeah.
So organizations, executives have been in the room. We've talked about what's the cost of hiring, what's our attrition rate, how much money are we losing. Uh, I don't hear, what are we doing with our leadership development program? How are we equipping our leaders? How are we making better leaders so we can reduce
Yes.
attrition?
Yeah.
So what Rick is saying is the accountability around what are we doing with leadership development, and how are we holding our leaders accountable? Having a consistent path to be able to say, here are the competencies, here's how we measure it, here's how we hold people accountable.
Yeah.
And so when we think about, well, what makes it successful? Well, the first thing is accountability. And you can impact somebody's pocketbook, and amazingly, it becomes important.
It does.
So excuse me, I think about employee net promoter score. I think about survey results. I think about attrition, and having those elements built into C-suite. And hear me here.
Yeah.
C-suite goals.
Yes.
Not just attrition and revenue. Meaning, we need to do 500 million in this or that, or we need to reduce or increase it. I've been talking about goals this week, so I've been having a lot of conversations around writing goals. But the reality is, it needs to be part of goals. It needs to be part of incentive. And if you are not meeting those goals, just like any other type of goal, then you're not going to be incentivized in the way that you want to be incentivized. So you're really putting your money where your mouth is.
You have to.
Is something that's going to impact.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree very much. We kind of already got into the next thing we had on our topic list, the value of it, right? And I put notes here. It's so much like marketing, which makes it difficult with the value, because we live in a microwave society, right? I want my dinner and I want it now. Fast food, fast casual. It's even there's big advertisements on my social media right now, because I made the mistake of looking for new suits online. And so now every third post is a suit commercial, but they're all about the fastest, easiest. And it's not like, good suit, especially 20 years ago. I mean, you can wait because it's hand tailored, and it's made with quality. And now it's the one that is getting the most time on my feed right now, which I won't mention because they're not paying me. But no, but it's all about, that you can machine wash it, and it snaps back into place, and you don't need to iron it, and there's no work involved.
Right.
And I think that's what we expect. And you brought up what I think is a fantastic example of working out, right? There are no quick fixes. There's not an instant ROI. The value is found when the vision is caught and the results are visible. But it takes time. It goes a long way. And I think there's a lot of people that are trying to do what you and I do, and they're promising a lot of things, and they simply can't deliver it, right? Because it's literally impossible. It's not that their program isn't good. It's not that they don't have tons of great experience. It's that we all think that we're the savior of mankind, and that our solution is the solution. And so one of the things we were going to ask about is like the future of leadership development. And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't mean to be a negative person. I'm very optimistic, but I just see so many people out there that are promising things that I know they can't deliver. And so what does that do to ABC Corp? It creates a bad taste in their mouth when they pay these people tons of money who promise instant results and a complete overhaul of culture. And then they go, well, what was that? What was that even worth?
Well, some of my friends of Spiral Leadership, they talk about you have to slow down.
You have
to speed up.
Yes.
For you to make substantive change. If you can slow down, then you can actually see the landscape and assess. All right, well, what are the things that we really need to do?
Yes.
And really the value around leadership development programs are really in its people. The managers, when we when we think about employee engagements, we think about attrition, retention, all those things. Boston Consulting Group actually just released a report over the past week and a half talking about the impact that middle managers make in organizations.
Yeah.
72% of attrition is impacted because of that leader. And there's a saying that has been around for years of people don't leave companies, they leave leaders.
Yeah.
People leave people.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
that middle leader, that middle manager really impacts the day-to-day of an organization. They have to be able to take strategy and transition it into the tactical. They need to be the day-to-day support for somebody whose kid is having issues at school, that it's impacting their performance. Somebody that's just been diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
They are there to make sure that if somebody has been trashed on the phone and that employee is really upset, like the leader is the one. So the pressure of being a leader right now, frontline leader, is extraordinary.
It is.
And COVID has exacerbated that because you're not just making sure the KPIs are being met.
Yeah.
You're also focusing on the psychological health of the individual.
100%.
Prior to pandemic, Google did the Aristotle Project Aristotle, really around psychological safety. And then as soon as we're like a couple of months in, everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going crazy." And then this expectation for leaders was added that you're not just doing the sales, the business, you're taking care of your people even more so. So the future of leadership is giving them access to tools.
Yes.
People, communities like this.
Yes.
And obviously you have access to resources online. Excuse me, but I think also what's happening with AI is fascinating. And if you use the tool effectively, you learn how to use it, it becomes another tool for you.
Yes.
I don't think that AI is going to just replace HR or replace leaders for that matter. It becomes another tool that you have as part of your leadership development program, as part of your sales tool, as part of your marketing tool. So I'm excited about it. In the moment, it can be frustrating to see failures of leadership. So I think it's also important to recognize when leadership is actually happening well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. It's easy to see the failures.
Yeah.
What do you look for to know that it's working?
I think the easiest thing is, and none of, when I say easy, I say that lightly.
Sure.
You can look at the data first of all, the data around employee engagement, even just employee absenteeism, and it is a way to be able to measure that. Retention, but also something as simple as a survey can really help. Now, I'm not going to go down this really long road, but I'm going to do a little short, like a little quarter mile here.
Okay.
Surveys are really important if they are asked on a regular basis and there's action.
Yep.
We hear time and time again, "Oh my gosh, like stop sending me surveys." And I've had a shift in mindset over the past couple of months because I do surveys, and I'm trying to get people to do surveys, but I don't do surveys. So first of all, I've had a change in heart around, okay, if somebody's going to ask me to do a survey, like I'm going to do a survey, but I want to see what the action is behind that.
Makes sense.
Because that's the thing that really matters. If in your survey you're measuring manager effectiveness, and one of the elements is, I know I'll be recognized for the contribution I make to the success of the organization. If you're scoring a 32%, there's probably another question around, I know how my performance is measured. I understand my goals. You'll probably have a low score there also.
Absolutely.
And now you're able to do something about it.
Yes.
So ways to be able to measure, is this effective, is probably not going to be, shouldn't be actually, checking the box of John has completed the leadership development program. He's going to be successful. Maybe.
Yay, John.
But at the end of the day, it still becomes about action.
Yeah.
Use boys in a boat, rowing, it's about action.
Yeah.
It's the work they get.
Yeah.
Use going to the gym, it's about the
Action.
work that you're
Yeah.
putting in. So I think it's the action behind a survey. And last piece would be the communication behind it. So you being able to say, hey, this is how we're performing, and being transparent.
Yes.
You know, the reality is there we have those blind spots. And if we don't acknowledge, hey, I'm not doing well here, I think vulnerability and authenticity in leadership, and just as being a decent human being, I think this is one of those shifts also. Jacob Morgan wrote a book, Leading Through Vulnerability. I think that's the right. It's just been the past couple of weeks or past couple of months that he released his book, and he talks about vulnerability doesn't equal leadership. It's vulnerability plus leadership equals vulnerable leadership. So it's not being vulnerable just to be vulnerable.
No.
Like, and he uses an example around the mental health space.
Yeah.
Like, I've been seeing a therapist. Okay.
Yeah.
That was
probably not inspiring a lot.
a little creepy.
Yes.
But if you partner that with,
yes,
you know, we see that there is a mental health crisis right now, and our employees are being impacted. And I've had conversations with our team that things are really tough right now. And so we're offering resources, you know, mental health awareness and mental wellness. I totally messed up the word, but getting education and having access to resources is important. And you know, that's impacted me also.
Bingo.
Vulnerability.
Yes.
And we're offering, so it's the action.
It is.
Of, hey, we're offering these resources. So a little bit different in the conversation, but I think it applies to, well, how do we do this really well?
Yeah.
I think it's around vulnerability. I think it's about applying some of these tools.
I had 3 words. I said staff feedback, retention, and increased output. It's the same thing that you were saying.
You're much more succinct than I am.
Which no one has ever said to me before. So
well, everyone's like, Joe's a storyteller, and
no,
yes, I am.
But so I can say a lot on feedback. I'll do a kind of a shameless plug. I had the privilege of partnering. So you and I both know vMind. vMind is a software, leadership assessment software that I'm partnered with, and Joe is I think going to use eventually.
Yes.
But I partnered with them and Bucket List, which is an employee recognition and rewards platform. And we did a webinar just on feedback culture. And so if you can find it, you can go to my website, servantmindedleadership.com. It's on the website under the podcast label. But that is a huge thing. And that follow through that you're talking about, that the whole idea that you just said, I just want to just affirm that. It's so true.
Yeah. I think recognition adds so much value back. You know, employees want to be people. I know we're in a business mindset, so we're talking about employees, but people want to be seen, valued, have a sense of belonging.
Yes.
Well, how do you do that? Recognition in a way that the employee feels seen, valued, and has a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
So earlier we were talking about you can't just create more copies.
You can't, no.
Because you actually get diminishing return when you make copies. I'm significantly older than you, so I remember burning CDs.
I remember burning CDs. I remember copying tapes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're in the same generation. If you're in that generation, say something in the comments around maybe.
I remember when we still read newspapers.
Mixtapes straight off of the radio, or burning CDs. The quality diminishes.
Worse every single time.
Right. Yeah. Now, having a consistent, repeatable process. Yes. Because that's talking about this is who we are as an organization.
But that's the difference in the process of making new tapes and copying old tapes.
Yes. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Yes.
If you have a good first copy and you're using that, and that is what you're modeling everything after, that's a process that is replicable and scalable.
Yes. That's your master.
That's your master. Yeah. But the minute you take copy 2 to make copy 3 and copy 3 to make copy 4, it's going to degrade. And that goes back to the 80% at best quality that you're going to get. Rick actually, I think, just spoke to this again. He commented again. Thank you, Rick, for joining and sharing. He said, I had the pleasure of working with a district manager who really understood the value of relationship The result was that I would, and often did, run through brick walls, for he made me feel valuable. And then he added, he said, I worked with him, not for him.
Yep.
And those types of leaders are ones I've gotten to enjoy in my life. That makes a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely. When we can see a partnership as a leader, that I'm not here to do command and control. I am here to partner. I'm here to collaborate. And finding the balance with that, because I know that there are times where we have to make decisions because we're the leader. But if we show up that way, we are creating a different model.
We are.
And it goes back to it might be the first time somebody's hearing it.
Mhm.
You know, so Rick, you talking about collaborating, working closely with this leader. He maybe have been able to speak to specific areas in your performance, you as an employee, and maybe even as an individual, that people had been saying to you multiple times. We'll use the kid or spouse example, but for some reason, because of the relationship he built with you, you heard him, and you heard it really well for the first time. I can reflect on my own experience with that. I had a leader, her name's Nan, and I was working for her in a regional office, and she had built trust with me for over a year, and then she had to share feedback with me. She knew I was not going. I could not receive well, and it was still hard to hear it from Nan. And basically, she was very kind, but I'll just summarize it to: you're a jerk, and nobody wants to work with you. And the way she approached it, she was so kind and gracious. And then she said, "How can I help?" And I think that's what Rick is talking about.
Absolutely.
That's what we're looking for. So when we look at this program piece, it's an and of yes, you need content, you need a program, you need the master.
Yeah.
You also need people alongside you, people further down the road.
100%.
And I approach leadership development with, I need somebody who's ahead of me, I need somebody who's beside me, and somebody who's behind me. And because that's my role as a leader, to continue to help raise up the next generation.
Absolutely. So we've got just a few minutes left. We're closing in on 12 minutes left in our time together. If you are watching and you have questions that you want us to engage in the last few minutes, I would ask you to go ahead and throw your questions in the chat now. I'm going to throw it back to Joe and ask just a final question that really answers the entire title of our thing. And I'll answer after he's done as well. But Joe, as they may submit questions as they want, why, in your opinion, has leadership not been fixed? It's 60 years of this training and these developments and these programs and these people and these initiatives. Why hasn't it been fixed?
Well, I think the reality is it's because of people.
Yeah.
Like we are not machines. And because of that, everybody has their own opinions. Everybody has different priorities. So to try and find alignment can be really complicated. So I think the reality to be able to fix this is you have to get on the same page.
Yes.
There has to be accountability. There has to be ownership.
For sure.
And it has to actually impact you in a way of where you're going to make change.
Yeah.
And it has to be that sustainable change. And then also understand that it's progressive change. It's not something that's going to change overnight.
I think that's so valid. Joe and I obviously collaborated to come up with the title, but I'll take ownership for the final wording. I won't pin that on him.
No, I think it's great. Yeah.
And so the question, right, the title, right, the title that we had on the banners and on this webcast or podcast or live event or whatever we're calling this.
Yeah.
What was, after 60 plus years of leadership training, why isn't leadership fixed? And quite honestly, even though I'm the one that said it, I think that's the wrong question. I think that when we approach leadership from a fix-it mentality, that's when we run into problems. Leadership is not a thing to be fixed. I think we've addressed leadership much like somebody will like and somebody will hate me for saying this, but we have addressed leadership like a man would address things. And as a man, we like to fix things.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Somebody's telling us their problem, and it is, we don't say, "Oh man, that must really be hard for you." We start offering solutions. Right. Well, why don't you do this? We'll just do that. And so we want to fix leadership, and that's not it. We need to be much more relational. like you said, and I've used the word several times today of journey. If you believe that any consultant, Joe, myself, or even the big names, the ones that you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get them for an hour or two, right? If you think that that is going to fix your leadership, I would just ask you to reassess the whole idea of what it means to develop your leaders.
Yeah.
Because it's not a fix it. It's not a turn a wrench or screw in a light bulb or do something like that. It's a journey of development. You would never think of your young child, and as they learn to walk and talk and eat, you would never engage them and think, I need to fix them. No, you would nurture them. You would empower them. You would lead them, guide them, and help them develop. And while leaders are not children, they are growing in a new set of skills.
Yeah.
And when the human entity learns new skills, we have to become like children.
Yep.
We have to start fresh. Same thing, we talked about the gym. If we go to the gym, we don't expect to fix it. We expect to work out.
Right.
We expect to stress and to strain and to go through a journey of becoming. And I think that is probably where so many organizations are struggling, because they're just looking for somebody to fix it.
Yeah.
And they're not recognizing this is not a fix it problem. This is a development journey.
Yeah, your examples are great. I think about practice.
Yeah.
So my CrossFit coach,
Okay.
John, we were talking about practice, and he said, I don't ascribe to practice makes perfect. I think practice makes permanent. And I was like, oh, like that's absolutely true. If you think about doctors, doctors, they're practicing over and over and over again. You're trying to get a movement down, you're trying to dance, like whatever it is, if you're trying to do something really well, you have to practice it over and over again. And it's in the moments of the failure, like, oh, I need to make that tweak. I need to do this. I need to do that. If we approach leadership development like that, if we approach life like that, not browbeating ourselves or other people, but recognizing, okay, this is where you are on your journey. You might be ahead of somebody, you might be side, you might be behind somebody. How are you continuing to grow? And are you in a posture of learning, of recognizing I don't have it all figured out? Nan clearly was really kind enough to say, you don't have it all figured out. And I was like, I was like 25, 27. Like I was young. And she said, how can I help? And I think when we approach this question around why hasn't leadership been the problem been solved, you're right. It's not a problem. It's going to be iterative. We're continuing to see that over and over again, the way we approach. We wouldn't be talking about vulnerability in leadership or vulnerability in the workplace. We wouldn't be having that conversation 20 years ago.
No.
Culture was different. And I think the hope is culture continues to change.
Absolutely.
We're seeing Gen Z on TikTok do this whole thing around work talk. And the reality of they're saying the things that we've felt and seen in the workplace, and they are brave enough to be able to say it. Some of it, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot. But the reality is, it's like real life. The Office is what we're seeing. And so if we continue to think about ways to be able to approach the conversation respectfully and be able to have the dialogue to learn from one another, I think leadership is going to be okay. But it is a perspective of how am I approaching leadership?
Indeed.
What are the tools? What's the master that I'm using? I think all of those things apply. It's not one thing. In reality, in most parts of life, it's not one thing that fixes something or corrects something. It's that practice, that iteration over and over.
And you're not only are you spot on, but I think the iteration has to change, not just with culture, but if I can go back to my development of children example, if you've had more than one child, you know that the strategies that worked on number one almost never work the same way on number two.
Never.
And so speaking, just kind of going back to this idea of a problem, right? If it was everything the same, if we were all little clones, you might be able to have a solution, a pair of glasses that you can offer. But Everything is different. That's the big issue I have right now with AI being used so much. I was having a conversation on LinkedIn yesterday with someone who reached out to me, and I don't know how many of you guys have seen the collaborative articles on LinkedIn. They're a really cool thing, but I've noticed that more recently, specifically in the leadership space, there's tons of articles in many other categories, but they're becoming less and less leadership and more kind of this watered down idea of management. And I have responded to a few of them. One of them, I said, "Silly me! I thought this was about leadership." As I as I responded, but he mentioned something. He said, "I think that AI is kind of watering this down." Now, is that AI's fault? No, AI is an amalgamation of information. That's all it's able to do.
Right.
And so if we kind of go and we type into whatever particular tool we're using, because there's quite a few of them now, and we're saying, what do I do about a leader that doesn't accept feedback? Well, it's going to give you an answer, and you're going to think, I've got it fixed.
Right.
And you've lost the journey.
Yep.
You've lost the relationship that you talked about when you're talking about the woman that just compassionately gave you that difficult news. One more story, and then I'll let you share kind of some final words. We do we have a good question? No, he just said, "Failure is like a blessing buried in the broken pieces" by Zach Williams.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Had an individual reach out to me, one of the middle-level leaders in the organization that I was working with. He said, "Hey, I've got a guy on my team. The hygiene is not what it should be, and I really need to address it because he's on my team." Oh, I just hit my mic. That's probably annoying. I need to address it, but we're kind of friends. And I don't know how that's going to work. And I said, "That's beautiful. You've already got the relationship. You can go to him and say, 'Hey, brother, I care about you. You know that I love you. You know that we already, so I'm not coming at you sideways. You know that I want what's best. And here's the problem. You're not the problem. Here's the problem. And we can work together to solve this problem.'" And I think that is so powerful in this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I've had to address dress code. And I've had to address body odor. In my early years as a leader and as a coach, and it is the reality. Because we all come from different environments. We have different upbringings. We're from different cultures. So bringing all of that into the workplace, we are going to be around people who are not like us, and what a beautiful thing that is. So understanding the ways of working, a part of leadership development is understanding just that.
Yes.
How do I get to know my employees and know that they are as unique as I am? And so I'm going to need to be able to interact with that employee differently than this employee.
Yes.
And it's the practice of that. Going back to one of my earlier comments of getting together as leaders and being able to talk, I think it is really important.
Absolutely. All right. Before we wrap up, how can people get in touch with you?
You can find me here on LinkedIn. You can look for Joe Makston, Makston. And then you can also follow me on social, on Instagram and on Facebook. Both same thing, Joe Makston.
Very original.
Yeah, it's super original.
Hey,
what about you?
Joe is a great guy, and even if just connect with him, see his posts. Are you still doing daily videos?
Yes.
Daily, like 2 to 4 minute, 5 minute videos.
Yeah.
He puts a lot of work into them, and he's got some great content. I support what he's doing,
Thank
and
you.
that's why we're doing this together. Just we really believe the vision. For me, servantmindedleadership.com is going to give you everything you want. Your LinkedIn works, the YouTube channel works, but all of that, servantmindedleadership.com. And I will officially announce that my book is officially in editing right now.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I finished How Mindfulness Changes Leadership. So the initial draft is done. We're hoping to have that released in April. And if anybody's interested in that, we will we'll look toward that. That more details will come.
It's an amazing accomplishment. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, Joe, it's been a pleasure, man.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Whether you joined us live or you're joining us later on, we're thankful to have had you with us, and we hope that this has been an empowering experience here at SML Consultative and the Servant Minded Leadership Channel. We are trying to empower leaders to change the world.